to revive talks on Ukraine's future. Here with me now for the latest is the White House National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz. Thank you so much for being here, sir. I want to ask for your view on what the Ukrainian president said after that Oval Office meeting. He repeatedly went online. He thanked the U.S. and President Trump for the help that the U.S. is giving, saying it is crucial to have the president's support, that no one wants peace more than we do. Is that enough for President Trump to get things back on track?
Well, the president took calls from Prime Minister Starmer yesterday. He's also taken a call from Prime Minister Meloni of Italy. President Zelensky is with those European leaders now. Those European leaders are talking to him directly about getting to the negotiation table. What does he need to see to actually negotiate with us and negotiate with the Russians, go to confidence-building measures, go to a ceasefire, and bring this horrific war to an end? And what was so, I think, stunning to all of us in the Oval Office was that it was not clear Zelensky was going to go to negotiations at all, that he would ever be able to negotiate with Putin, and whether he shared our goal of ending this war. So what I made clear as Secretary Rubio, and I said, look, this cannot proceed, was that this was a huge missed opportunity for him and for his country. He could have left the White House on Friday on the heels of an engagement with President Macron of France, with Prime Minister Starmer of the United Kingdom, where they were talking about European boots on the ground, security guarantees for Ukraine, a positive movement towards ending this war, and having Ukraine and the United States being bound together for a generation economically. But what we made clear was that could not proceed, at least for now. And President Trump said in his announcement on X, when President Zelensky is ready to truly engage for peace, he's welcome back anytime.
So what does the president need? What does President Trump need? Does he need a public apology? Does he want a phone call? Can you be specific on how to make that happen?
Well, you know, it wasn't clear to us that President Zelensky was ready to negotiate in good faith towards an end to this war. You know, for us, kind of talking about the details and demands of security guarantees before, as President Trump said, look, I don't know that we can get both sides to the table at this point. And, you know, you can't kind of trash the other side going, litigating through the history of this conflict if we're going to bring both sides to the table. And further, coming to the Oval Office, with the body language, the shaking of head, the kind of the arms crossed, we found it incredibly disrespectful. We were ready to sign that deal. I want to address directly that this was some type of ambush is absolutely false. We had negotiated the minerals deal in the weeks prior. It was difficult, but it was done and finalized and ready to be signed in the East Room.
So since you've been talking about his body language and his approach, I do want to ask about your view of Volodymyr Zelensky, because right after the Ukraine war happened, after Russia invaded Ukraine, to be more specific, you were on CNN and you called Zelensky a 21st century Churchill because of how he was leading the fight against Russian tyranny. And yesterday you called him, or at least you compared him to an ex-girlfriend who wants to argue everything that you said 9 years ago rather than moving forward. Is that really how you see it now? And do you see at all the perspective that he was trying to put out there, which is that he does not trust Vladimir Putin and he feels that he needs some kind of security guarantee?
Well, Donna, I would also point out, if we want to do a history lesson on Churchill, that he stood and fought for his people. President Zelensky stood and fought for Ukraine. But Churchill was also voted out of office in 1945. He was a man for a moment, but he did not then transition England into the next phase. And it's unclear whether President Zelensky, particularly after what we saw Friday, is ready to transition to Ukraine to an end to this war and to negotiate and have to compromise.
Yeah.
And what President Trump said right there that day in the Oval Office is both sides are going to compromise here. He's made that clear to both Vladimir Putin and Zelensky, but it did not appear to us that Zelensky was ready to go to peace.
Yeah.
So when he makes that clear to us, publicly and privately, that's the president is trying to end this war. He campaigned on it. He was elected on it. And that's going to take tough diplomacy. Who would criticize us? But you have members of Democrats that are criticizing us for dealing with the Russians, the same Democrats that had no problem dealing with the murderous Iranian regime in an Iran deal that was horrific and used the Russians as intermediaries.
I
think you got one of those senators coming on your show. So it's so I'm finding the kind of hypocritical pearl clutching in Washington, D.C. to be a bit ridiculous.
Can I just follow up on what you said about Winston Churchill? Because it is interesting. He was definitely a man for the moment during World War II. Are you suggesting that President Trump wants Zelensky to resign?
We need a leader that can deal with us, eventually deal with the Russians, and end this war. And if it becomes apparent that President Zelensky's either personal motivations or political motivations are divergent from ending the fighting in his country, then I think we have a real issue on our hands. But look, Donna, let's ask ourselves, what is this war going to look like a year from now? The patience of the American people to keep giving billions and billions and billions with no end in sight is not unlimited. And we also made that clear to President Zelensky at the end of that meeting.
So you're saying he might be...
Is time on his side? Is time on the American people's side? What I'm saying is this war needs to end, and that's going to take concessions on territory. That's going to take Russian concessions on security guarantees. That's going to take all sides coming to the table, and we are working very hard to drive those negotiations forward. We had our engagement in Riyadh with the Russians. We are working to have an engagement, we thought, a deal with the Ukrainians, and then we'll bring all sides together. That only President Trump can do that. And I find it incredulous he's being criticized for that.
You just mentioned a specific concession, potentially, that you would like Vladimir Putin to make. Can you elaborate on that? Because we haven't heard any specifics before.
Well, we can't get any specifics from the Ukrainians, but this will clearly be some type of territorial concession for security guarantees going forward. I mean, that has been discussed in previous rounds of negotiations. A security guarantee from the U.S.? And we think that is a broader framework.
Who guarantees that security?
Well, right now, some first principles. This needs to be a permanent end, not a temporary end. This needs to be European-led security guarantees going forward. Part of that is Europe's contribution to its own defense, so it has the capability to do so. We've had both the United Kingdom and France talking about their troops on the ground going forward. And then, let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. What type of support we provide or not is to be negotiated. But one thing is clear, we do not see Ukraine being a member of NATO, because that would automatically drag U.S. troops in. But Donna, look, we need to get all sides to the table, and we're very frustrated that we did not see that from the Ukrainians after we had negotiated a minerals deal that would bind us together, grow their economy, and change the nature of our aid so that the American taxpayer could recoup
What are your conversations?
That was all done and ready to be signed on Friday.
What are your conversations like right now with the Russians in terms of reopening conversations and perhaps diplomatic normalization, embassies, and so forth?
Well, Secretary Rubio's team at a working level have met with the Russians about broadening our embassy operations. They were virtually shut down on all sides. It's just a practical matter and common sense. If we're going to drive these negotiations forward, our embassies have to be operable. Those conversations are happening, and we're also having conversations about how they will end and what they need to see to end this war. There will obviously be differences on all sides, and the United States, through shuttle diplomacy and the leadership of President Trump, will drive forward to bridge those gaps. Our point is, talking about the fine details of security guarantees is like talking about the details of a warranty before you know if